welcome back! Today we are not having a book review video. This is going to be the next book review, Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. I am about 80 pages from the end of it and I just don't feel like rushing it, but also there was a video that I've been meaning to make for a while, so I decided this is a good opportunity to do so. This is going to be our next update on my publishing journey. I put this video off for a while because I felt like I didn't have any actual news to give, like I had no updates, but I realized, yeah, I do. Starting with the fact that I actually do have work out there in the world that you can buy right now. First, I have Drunks of the French Quarter Theater. This is basically sort of a coffee table kind of touristy book that is just scenes and vignettes of things that happened that I saw in the French Quarter. They're presented as theatrical scenes. They are sometimes funny, sometimes poignant, sometimes a little bit what the hell. But this is available on Amazon, it's available on Barnes & Noble, it's available pretty much anywhere you can get books, as well as down in the French Quarter. If you ever happen to be in New Orleans and taking a tour, Unique Nola has a shop, and I work out of there, and they sell my book. So, yeah, you can get my work there. Or, there's also Dead Girls Walking, the red volume, by Wicked Shadow Press. This is a collection of short stories about ghosts, and specifically female ghosts. And I have a short story in it called Dorian in the Sea. And I have not really had much experience with publishing short stories because I don't write many short stories. I don't usually get inspiration to write them. And literally I saw an ad for this anthology and for some unknown reason just immediately got an idea of the story I wanted to write for it, and did. It's about a young woman named Dorian who finds herself weirdly drawn to the sea, and when she goes on a nice little vacation to a small coastal town, she suddenly starts seeing something that may or may not be a ghost. But yeah, I like my story in this, and I have a full review of the entire anthology. There are some stories in it I really like, some stories I'm less interested in, but the important thing is you can buy this and read some of my work. But also, I just finished a book last night. Like, literally, I just wrote the words last night at the end. And I will admit this is one that gonna need editing like all books do, and I'm not entirely sure that the falling action is complete. Like, it still feels a little bit meandering, like it doesn't feel like I've found that button into it yet. But I really like it. It's called Marrow's Home. It's about a half merman kind of person. He was raised in this university, magic university, with a buttload of weird professors who treat him more like he's a lab experiment than like a person. And his love interest is a young man named Leopold, who is a student at the university, and has basically been in love with Marrow since the day they met. He had no idea that Marrow was anything except a normal student, and they grew up together in a way because this is a university, but it's like, they've been at school since they were, Leopold's been at school since he was like 10. So yeah, they are bonded together, and when things get bad, finally they decide to run away together to try to find a place that they can both be comfortable, both be happy, and build a home. And of course things go disastrously wrong, because otherwise there wouldn't be a book there. But it's about finding the place you fit in the world and where you are loved. It's about dehumanization and objectification, but not in a sexual way, just like using people as tools and weapons kind of way. And I really love it. I think it's gonna be great. It does, like I said, need editing, and knowing my process, knowing that I like to take a break before I go back to editing, knowing that I like there to be at least 2 edits, and knowing that I'm probably gonna want this one to be beta read, I'm suspecting the earliest I could possibly get ready to query it is the end of 2025. I would love it if I could get it done earlier than that, but I don't want to rush it because I love my books and I want them to be as good as possible. But also, I've decided I'm self-publishing a book. It's called, at this moment, The Librarian and the Ghost. I've changed titles a couple times. I'm not fully happy with the title on this one, but it'll be out in April of 2025, knock on wood, and it's a cozy haunted house story. It's about a young woman named Olivia who gets a job in this library on a small New England island that is slowly sinking into the ocean. One of those islands that has like 2,000 people that live there during the tourist season and only like 200 during the rest of the year. This library is in a gorgeous old Victorian mansion and has a collection of rare antique books. And this is like the opportunity of the lifetime for Olivia. This is what she's always dreamed of. And when she gets there, she discovers that the library might also have a ghost. And it's just a sweet little story, not super high stakes. It's about her finding her place in the world and about specifically her discovering who this ghost is, tracking down the mystery of what's going on with the library. And I really like it. But I will admit, the reason I chose it to self-publish over all the others is largely because I already had in mind what I wanted for the cover, and cozy genre, like cozy mysteries, cozy romance, cozy fantasy, it's all having a bit of an industry boom right now, and all of them tend to use covers that are simple and cartoony. And I was like, I think I can probably get that made for slightly cheaper than what I want for a lot of my longer fantasy works, because growing up in the 90s, I loved the hand-painted covers with character images on the front, and that's sort of what I want. And those kind of covers tend to either be expensive or look a bit like they're AI, and I don't want AI anywhere near any of my books. But because of that, I was like, this one will be slightly cheaper for me to make. Also, because it's a novella instead of a full-length novel, it will also be cheaper for me to print. So if I want to get physical copies, it will just be cheaper for me to get this one out than any of the others. And also just because it's a novella, it's easier and quicker for me to get through editing, and therefore I can get the ball rolling a bit quicker. Because what really sparked this decision to go ahead and self-publish was the election. There was just something about that night that I was just like, I need to do something. I cannot trust the world to give me the opportunities I have been promised. I need to make them myself. And I don't know, I just don't feel like right now the publishing industry is becoming more inclusive and more open and more welcoming to debut authors. And I don't feel like the publishing industry is that interested in taking, like, you know, wild swings at unusual books. And this book is slightly unusual, I will admit it. It's not high stakes, it's sort of walking the genre lines a bit. So I'm like, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna do it myself. But this has opened a new line of panics for me. I now get to panic over things like the cover. And I have a cover artist. They are somebody I used to teach back when they were younger. August now has a degree in design, so I was like, why not? This sounds good. And I am panicking a bit because, like, I've never done this whole commissioning art from people thing. Not really. I've had a lot of friends in my life who are artists, but never like a sit down and this is what I want, draw it for me, I'll give you this much money. But I've seen initial designs, like sketches, and I'm very interested in some of the things August is saying. I'm like, yes, that sounds perfect. So I cannot wait to see the full drawing, but of course I'm also panicking because it's me. I'm also panicking over the decision about whether or not I should do ARCs. ARC means Advanced Reader Copy. And these are sent out usually a month or two before the book is available to the public. And the idea is that you want to get a couple of reviews up on Amazon, on Goodreads, on places like that. Get people out there talking about your book before it comes out, hopefully so that they will pre-order or buy your book as soon as it's available. I will admit I don't really understand why there's such a push to get as many sales as possible immediately. Like, maybe I'm a weirdo here. I admit I prefer to have a book that has a life that's like one copy selling a month for like 10 years than a book that has a life that is, oh, we sold 100 copies, but only in the first month and never again. Like, that doesn't sound as good to me. But I don't know. I'm still going back and forth, and my main reason that I'm leaning away from doing ARCs is because I don't have the money to market this thing. I'm not planning on buying ads on Facebook or on Amazon or anywhere. I'm planning on my advertisement being me talking about it here on YouTube, me talking about it on Threads, on Blue Sky if I can figure out the damn algorithm. But it's going to be up to me. And those are also the people I can imagine wanting ARCs. And it does not make logical sense in my brain for me to give these books away to people who may or may not advertise them to others. I would much prefer to get the sales. Like, I know that sounds sort of selfish, but yeah. And like, if there's someone who really, really wants it and doesn't have the money to buy it, if they reach out to me, I might be willing to give it to them in exchange for like them talking it up on their social media. But I know I'm not going to magically get any of the ARC readers that make a huge difference. I'm not going to be managing to get a big Bookstagram influencer to want to buy this ARC or want to get this ARC. So I'm leaning away from it at this moment. I might change my mind, and if so, then I'll get to figure out all the different whatever is necessary to actually get the ARCs to the people who need to read them. But for now, I'm sort of planning on skipping that step. I've already done alpha readers on this thing. It is currently with beta readers. I have like 6 beta readers. One of them has already gotten back to me, which is great, because having just finished a book last night, this is when I was planning on going back to editing. But I still need to get back the rest of the beta readers, and then I can do the last beta reading edit like afterwards. And then I get to format it, which I may make a video about all these steps, who knows, and then all the copywriting stuff, and then I get to send it off and hopefully get copies of my book and put it up for sale in the real world, where y'all could buy my story. So I'm really excited about that. But the other thing I want to talk about in this video is, what am I doing with my old books? So I'm pretty sure the last update I did for y'all was when I talked about the fact that I was planning on sending some of my old books out to small presses. And I have. I've sent a few out, not as many as I wanted, because when I was sending them out, I realized that a lot of the submission materials that I had made, I no longer like them. I think that it's not great. The books I still think are great. The query letter, the synopsis, all that stuff, I'm sitting here going, no wonder you didn't get a publisher, this is crap. But, and so that means I've been slowly working on rewriting all of those. But also, it just takes a lot longer to hear back from small presses than agents. And it makes sense because most small presses accept the full manuscript. So, I did send out, I think it was like 12 of them across the first couple of months of this year. And I've heard back from most of them, or at least most of them have been long enough I think it's safe for me to assume that that's a no and move on and try a different small press. But I'll probably do more of that soon. But I do have a grand total of now 8 books that are on my backlist to send out to different people. But I don't know if I've ever actually just run through my books and told y'all what I have. The first one is crap. I acknowledge that the first book I wrote is not good. It's one of the truisms that everyone talks about in writing, that the first book you're going to write is just practice. And I hated hearing that. I was like, no, this is going to be a good book, especially considering that one took me like 5 years. And yeah, it's crap. I acknowledge it. Like, objectively, it reads like bad fanfiction. I'm probably never going to do anything with it except for maybe salvage some scenes from it, because I will admit there are scenes in it that are really good. It's just the overall structure is not a book. But the second one is called Broken Guardian. It is a story about 2 sort of teenagers. Dial is like 18, Marin is younger than that, and they come from a very, very peaceful country where these creatures called stars are sort of like angels drop down to the planet to guide people. They are very magically powerful, and the country next door invaded their country to try to get all these stars and use them. And Dial managed to sort of accidentally open a portal to a different world. And ever since then, him and Marin have been running from world to world to world. Our book takes place in a new world that they have just landed in, that at first they think is going to be super safe for them because there's no magic here, and therefore there's going to be no one trying to get Marin. Except slowly they find out there's a lot more going on below the surface, and magic does exist in this world. They just don't call it that. But they also end up at a pseudo-military camp where all the orphans and the kids of the poor in this country are trained to be in the army. And it's... I know that it has a little bit of a problem in it, that A lot of the tone does feel YA. The characters are young enough that it could be categorized as YA. And a lot of the themes are sort of YA, but I did not write it with the intention of it being YA. And there's a buttload of cursing in that book, and a lot more violence than I personally would choose to put in a YA book. I really just wasn't thinking of it as young adult, but I suspect that part of the reason I had trouble selling it is because, like, it's very clearly feels like an older YA book, but it's written at a length for an adult book, and I was trying to sell it as an adult book. And if I do ever decide to self-publish this one, I likely probably will sell it as new adult or young adult, and just with a warning saying, hey, there's a lot of adult stuff in this book. It's just not meant for them. But the book after that was Arya's Dragon, which is the story of a young woman who is sacrificed to a dragon, and come to find out that, of course, the dragon turns out to be a hot guy. And she ends up dragged off to the dragon court where humans are kept as pets. And a lot of that book is about her discovering her own power, learning to stand up for herself, and a lot of it, I will admit, is about the relationship between the dragon and the girl, and it's very much about the interesting power dynamics and things like that. But it's another one that has a problem of the early chapters do definitely read as YA. Because I wanted it to sound sort of like a fairy tale that evolves into something deeper. And because of that, I have a tonal problem. It starts out sounding like it's meant for a younger audience than it is, and you have to get like 3 chapters in before it adjusts to a more adult tone. And so if I do self-publish that one, that is something I'm probably going to adjust just so it's not confusing to readers. But otherwise, I absolutely love that book. The next one is in the same world, and I sort of envisioned Arya's Dragon and Kaito Organa being entry points to the same series. That they both are going to have a sequel. I think they both will have a sequel that is a standalone, and then the 3rd book in the series is a crossover. It's happening in both series. And this seemed like a great innovative plan when I was like imagining it, and now I'm like, oh god, the marketing. But Kaito Organa is about a young prince named Jaden, who is the younger prince, the spare prince, and he has never exactly gotten the impression he's a wanted prince. He is a lot weaker than his older brother, just smaller, and he also does not like girls, and in this kingdom that's a huge problem. So he's basically never felt at home in his home. He's always been a little bit hated. And he's off at war when he captures a prisoner named Kaito Organa. And Kaito is this giant of a man who's incredibly good at fighting, incredibly arrogant, and in many ways exactly what Jaden wished he could be. And over the next couple of months, they sort of develop a relationship. Kaito teaches him how to respect himself and, you know, admire himself for his own abilities, and basically try to help him find a place in his homeland. But meanwhile, Kaito is secretly there for another reason. Then there's Child of Earth and Air, which is one that's honestly a good standalone. Like, if I self-publish one after The Librarian and The Ghost, this is a good possibility. It takes place on a world that is made up of small islands, and there are 3 species on this world. There are the children of the earth, the children of the air, and the children of the sea. The children of the air, of course, have wings and live up in the sky. The children of the sea live underwater. And the children of the earth don't know anything about this. They have completely forgotten the majority of their history because a lot of their islands over the years have mysteriously sank. And the sinkings have basically fractured their history and left them unaware of what's going on around them. And it follows a young woman named Isabella, who is entering a university to be an engineer. And the engineering department is building the first ever submersible on this world, which little do they know, that would break the treaty that is keeping these 3 species from going to all-out war. And the only person who knows anything about this is a young man named Ward, who is a beggar who spends a lot of time around the university. He's missing his eyes and 1 leg, and everyone just sort of dismisses him as this sweet, innocent beggar. But it turns out he knows a lot more about the different species and the war than anyone else alive. or at least anyone else on land. Then there's Mercenary and the Wolves, which is one that I really wish had gotten out there. Like, I feel like this would have been a really solid debut for me. I feel like this one had so much legs to it. But the problem with it is it's too long, according to most traditional publishers. Like, most of the time, if you're looking at getting a fantasy novel traditionally published, agents, most of them are talking about wanting something under 120k words, and Mercenary and the Wolves is 150k, and I have tried my damnedest to get this thing smaller, and the book just needs to be that length. And part of it is because it's a dual narrative. We're following a group of mercenaries who have landed in this country that they don't know where the hell they are. They've been shipwrecked here. They are very confused, especially considering the sunset keeps coming a lot earlier than it should, and it stays darker than it should, and there are these monsters out in the darkness that kill people, and this place is dealing with plagues and famine and all sorts of crazy stuff. But the other timeline is following the wolves who used to rule this kingdom. Sorta. It's also following the daughter of the usurper who took over this kingdom. Because, yeah, up until a generation ago, this country was run by a group of shapeshifters called the Wolves. And it was always said that they had to be the ones that ruled because the goddess who invented them, basically, tied the protection of their kingdom to the wolves' very magic. And then a group of nobles decided they didn't like the wolves running things anymore and took the throne. And the wolves sort of just let them sort of stand back and let it happen because they're honestly okay with letting just someone else see if they can do it better. But now the kingdom is obviously in shambles and the wolves are going to have to step up and take it back. But our main characters here are Evan, one of the mercenaries, and Mirka, the daughter of the usurper, but the younger daughter, who has noticed there's something wrong and hasn't really been able to do anything about it until a wolf shows up in her bedroom, and she basically has to make a decision of which royal family is she gonna side with. And I love this book. It's got a straight romance and a gay romance. It's got violence. It's got interesting mythology. I love this book, but it was always going to be a hard sell for traditional publishing as a debut because it's just, they would consider it too long. But the next book is The Bones of Stone, and Bones of Stone is set in a sort of Roman-ish world, not following the Roman mythology, like we don't have Zeus and Hera wandering around, but sort of the Roman governmental and class structure. And it follows a young woman named Rissa who grew up enslaved in a salvage yard. Her owner basically collects garbage and sells it on whatever can be salvaged, and the reason she can make money off of this is her entire workforce is enslaved and horribly, horribly treated. And the book starts with Rissa deciding she's had enough, she can't be there anymore, and running off to fight in the Colosseum, because pretty much the only way that enslaved people in this world are guaranteed freedom is by fighting in the Colosseum. If they can win enough matches to buy their own freedom, there's nothing the person who owns them can do to stop them. And Rissa is determined to do this. And the book's about her finding her place, about getting freedom, also helping others to freedom, and accidentally sparking a revolution. But it's also very much about, like, personal culpability with the ills of your society. How much is your responsibility to fix? How much is your responsibility to point out? What is your responsibility? And it's another one that I love and is a standalone. It would be a good one to sell. And the last one is the one that I was querying up until quite recently. I called it Shadow and Light, and like I'm still like fond of the title, but I will admit the reason I came up with that title is because Blank and Blank was very popular and trendy when it came to fantasy titles at the time, and this was an active choice to try to align with the market. And if anything, I think it actually hurt me. I think it made the book sound too generic. But I got no interest in this one when I was querying it, and I don't understand because I think it's a damn good book. But it's about a group of thieves that live on a series of islands called the Victorial Islands. You'll notice I like islands, I like ships, like, I will include a lot of them, but they are part of a race called the Costi, and the Costi used to live on one of these islands, but basically the Victorials came in, took over the island, and kicked them out. But they have nowhere else to go, so they're just sort of traveling amongst the islands, but they aren't granted citizenship, so they can't own property, they can't work jobs, and basically all they can do is be thieves. And we follow Mika and Tila, who are cousins, and their friend Thomas as they're traveling around the islands and trying to survive. And the inciting incident is they run into the man who was Tila's childhood sweetheart, who has grown up to become a guard, and he basically is forced to track them down. And when he realizes he would prefer to turn against his country than see Tila hanged, they go on the run together, and slowly throughout the book they have to make the decision of what is worth fighting for. Is their home worth fighting for? And once again, love this book. It's a damn good book. I could not convince any agents to look at it. But yeah, so those are the books I have. I do have a plan in place already that if the Librarian and the Ghost sells enough to earn me about $300, I can publish a book on that much money. I'd prefer to have a little bit more. I'd really, really like to have about like $3,000 to $6,000 so I could hire a professional editor. Because while, yeah, I have editing skills, I have edited for a job before. I've edited for friends and family for years. I've edited my own work copiously. I have a literature degree. The only reason I'm not professionally editing right now is every time I look into it, I see that the entry pay is so low, it's not worth my time. I make more, you know, being a tour guide, and would make more working at McDonald's. So in the end, I end up just saying, no, I'd prefer to spend my writing time writing. But the point is, I know I have editing skills, but I also know it is always better to have a professional editor. And like, yeah, I have friends and family who are willing to beta read for me and who are really good at beta reading for me, but that's still not a professional editor. But a professional editor also costs thousands of dollars. I even have an editor I've chosen to be my editor. Like, I know who I want to hire if I get the money. I just don't have the money. And in the end, I'm not willing to continue waiting until I either magically find the money, which I never will, or wait for an agent to open the door for me. I will continue knocking on that door, but I'm also going to be putting my work out there. As I make enough money from whatever, or even just save up enough money, I will be publishing my work, because I love my books. I want y'all to be able to read them. And no offense, I'm not willing to give away years worth of work for free. So I am going to be publishing them and selling them. And hopefully I make enough money to at least make back what I spend on them. But I'm really hoping this is my journey into actually making enough to live off of my writing. And before anyone says it, don't say it. It's not impossible to live off of your writing. I know several authors who do. You have to live frugally, you have to be cautious, but you can do it.